Our guest today is Andrew Griffiths, the Director of Policy and Corporate Development at Planet Mark and co-founder of the Carbon Accounting Alliance. Planet Mark is an internationally recognized sustainability certification that helps organizations set credible net zero targets and communicate their progress with confidence and transparency. His work at the Carbon Accounting Alliance has built a coalition representing over 500 organizations across 45 countries. Together, the Alliance works to help influence standard setting and facilitates the sharing of best practices for carbon accounting professionals to help drive real change on a global scale. In today's episode, we'll explore a little bit into Andrew's journey, the innovative work happening at Planet Mark and the Carbon Accounting Alliance, and then take a deep dive into the value of the carbon accounting industry working together to build credibility through transparency and standardization. Andrew brings a blend of expertise, energy, and laughter to our conversation that left me feeling inspired. I certainly enjoyed our conversation, and I hope you do too. Welcome to the Carbon Accounting and Management Podcast, presented by North Star Carbon Management. I'm your host, Chris Barsman. If you're a professional responsible for managing your organization's carbon footprint, this podcast is for you. We bring you expert insights, emerging technologies, and actionable strategies to excel in the complex world of carbon management. Stay tuned for an enlightening conversation and real-world solutions. Let's jump in. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you wouldn't mind sharing your title and where you work, what you do, your position, and maybe a little bit of an elevator pitch around what you do and the work you accomplish.
Sure thing. Thanks, Chris. So Andrew Griffiths. I'm Director of Policy and Corporate Development at Planet Mark in my day-to-day life. And then by night, I am a co-founder of the Carbon Accounting Alliance. I'm also involved in a number of other honorary positions and advisory boards and bits and pieces here and there across a spectrum of things that I'm sure we can get into in more detail. But the elevator pitch, I guess, is so Planet Mark, we're a sustainability certification. We're a carbon accounting provider where we support organizations to measure and reduce their carbon emissions. We certify progress on carbon reduction. So our members, of which there are over 800 organizations around the world, including some in the US, around Europe, Malaysia, Australia, all sorts. They have to be measuring and reducing their footprint every single year to maintain their certification. And so because of that expectation, we have to be helpful. And so we're quite hands-on in supporting organizations to drive net zero decarbonization efforts. And the Carbon Accounting Alliance I'm the co-founder alongside my co-founder Emission. I know we'll get into more about how that all kind of came together, but it's the beginnings of a trade body, I guess, for the carbon accounting sector to bring us together to have conversations about how we advance best practices in carbon accounting.
Awesome. Well, let me just say, I appreciate the work that you're doing on the Planet Mark side of things. Obviously, that's the realm that we live in North Star Carbon as well, a little bit. I always like to bring in folks that are I don't want to say competition, because I feel like this is one of those areas where technically we're competition, but we're all driving towards the same goal of improving the planet, hopefully making it a livable place for our future. And so I think at the end of the day, while we can look at each other as competition, I think we tend to look at each other as colleagues and supporters of the same mission. Allies. I love it. Better way to say that.
No, seriously, because I think that it's one of the fundamental premises that underpinned the whole kind of origin story of the Carbon Accounting Alliance was we just ask ourselves some very simple questions where you go, is Planet Mark capable of measuring and certifying every single company in, let's just say, the UK in the next 6 months? No, absolutely not. We could not possibly scale that fast. That is way too much for any one organization to try and do. And frankly, there are some industries that were probably not the best choice. So therefore, but our mission, therefore, being to, tackle the climate crisis and to, achieve net zero as a society globally across the economy. In order to achieve that vision and purpose, if we recognize that we cannot do that by ourselves, then we need allies. And it is in our interest for those allies to be allies who are operating to similar levels of best practices and robustness across the board, and that we're all learning, growing, developing, and advancing the sector together. And that really is at the heart of it. So that's why I think as a sector, it's not just that we are great people, which I think we are. I also think that it's because there's a fundamental premise that sits at the heart of what we do, where all of our missions are to achieve an outcome that is fundamentally and inherently bigger than us. We're not here to sell the most carbon footprints. We're here to solve the climate crisis, and we can't solve the climate crisis alone. And so, I think I definitely echo that, and that's why within Planet Mark and all our conversations, I sort of ban the word competitors. So we'll call each other allies or peers, because we need each other.
Yeah, and I think that speaks right to the idea of the Carbon Accounting Alliance and the work that you folks are doing. I know we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the Alliance being founded. I believe that's December 10th, if I'm not mistaken. And I wanted to say, first off, congratulations on that. I know I've seen a ton of growth in the organization already. And so wanted to just kind of get into that. What do you think has gone into the ability to be successful? Not every organization makes it a year that start off the way you do. And you guys have seen a lot of growth and a lot of buy-in. And so I was just curious, what do you think are the contributing factors, and how have you gotten there?
I think the first thing is that we tapped an idea and a vein that was already it was already festering. It was already there. It was like when we went out and had conversations with the first people around this, where basically it all began. I had a chat with Amelia, and I went, we tell all of our clients that they should be collaborating with their sector, with their industry, to come up with solutions to their biggest problems and help drive their overall sector toward net zero. We tell you must collaborate within your industry. Are we collaborating with our industry? Are we talking to each other on a regular basis and seriously talking about best practices for our carbon accounting sector? No. Should we probably walk the walk on that? Yes. Okay, well, let's do that. And honestly, we went out so Amelia and I then sent emails to a bunch of people that we knew in different spaces within our industry, saying, we think it'd be kind of cool for us to come together and see if it's worth us having a forum, a format where we come together to have conversations about best practices in the sector. Would you be interested in coming along to just a quick exploratory call where we'll get our heads together on a Zoom call, and we'll hash out what we think we might be able to do together? And when we did that, what happened was multiple people came back and went, I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking someone needs to do that. And so I think it was one of these things where it was going to happen. It was just who was going to be the first one to just go, all right, I'll put my shoulder behind this now and, make something happen. And so from then, we launched, it's actually been going, the first conversations were more than a year and a half ago, sort of April 2023, when we probably had our first gathering of a small group of people going, what would this look like if we did it? And I think the first call we had about 13, 14 people coming together saying, what would this look like? And we spent the next 6 months going, what would we do together? Like there's got to be a purpose here. There's got to be deliverables. There's got to be something that we're trying to achieve. And so we played with that. And the first thing we did was, because it was predominantly UK or entities that were multinational that had spaces in the UK. And the first exercise we did was we wrote a letter to the UK government, to the UK Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, with a bunch of recommendations based on our experiences of things that were pain points for carbon measurement for organizations that they might not have heard from anyone else before us. One example of that is, wouldn't it be wonderful if it was mandatory for landlords and tenants to share energy, water, and waste data with each other, so that you weren't stuck in a position where a company wants to measure their carbon footprint, but their landlord won't give them the data that they need to do that.
Yes.
Right? Really common problem for our sector. But for the individual company, it's an irritation, but it's not a massive thing. But for us within the sector who do lots of carbon footprints, we see how much it happens as a minor irritation in lots and lots of different places. So as a collective voice, we're able to go, this is a massive issue. If you regulate this, it will make a difference. And so we submitted this letter with a number of other things on it, not really knowing what would happen. And what happened was we were invited in for a meeting. to come into
Wow.
government. And so 5 of us went in, and then everyone else tuned in via Zoom. We got permission to like let everyone else like be a fly on the wall for it. We had a meeting where we came in and discussed the recommendations that we'd put forward. And we suddenly realized that not only was this interesting as a concept to carbon accountants, as we can come together, we can talk about things, we share the same problems. Isn't this wonderful? It's therapy as much as anything else. But actually, policymakers really liked it as well, because we had the director for net zero for the whole of the UK civil service. We had then directors or heads of department for green skills, for transportation, for housing, like all these different sort of department heads. And we're going, they're taking us quite seriously. At the time, there was like 20 of us.
Yeah.
We're not a formal. We're not a formal anything. We've just called ourselves at that point. I think we called ourselves the Carbon Measurement Alliance. We changed it to Carbon Accounting Alliance, and it just kind of snowballed from there, where we sort of went, okay, we're seriously onto something here. There is a need on multiple fronts when this is of interest to multiple stakeholders, and so we were like, okay, let's do the next thing we'll do. We had already started having monthly chats. We were having these discussions, and it was all very interesting. But like, let's have a launch. Let's launch and announce that this is a thing that other people can join. And we decided to do that just before COP, which last year was in December in Dubai. And so we launched it the week before COP with a press release and a bunch of social media posts where we gave all of the existing members. We had 37 founding member organizations who all posted on that day, and we put out a press release. That was it. That's the only thing that we did. By the end of COP, we had, I think, over 150 members. Wow. From all over the world. Just people just somehow heard about it, saw it, and it just word of mouth went and really spread out. And so
the need for the community was there.
Yeah, we've done zero. We have paid for nothing. We have done no promotion, no advertising. We have a social media account. We don't really use it. On LinkedIn, we have a page, but it has been, we set up a website really super simply, and then it's just snowballed. And so at this point, as of today, we have 572 members in 50 countries around the world. And collectively, this group measure somewhere between 90,000 and 120,000 company carbon footprints every year, which is really exciting in one sense. Because when you look at like CDP is the biggest disclosure engine going, and last year they gathered about 23,000 company results. So the collective of the Carbon Accounting Alliance measurement that's happening is more than triple the biggest known sort of amalgamation of disclosure in the world currently. So that's exciting in one level, but then also the other thing that there's something I don't think any of us have realized before. I think we all assumed all of our other allies were doing more. Like, oh, the Carbon Trust and Thesis, they must be doing tens of thousands. Like, they must be doing so many carbon footprints. And now we've learned, no. When you think about in the UK alone, there are about 6 million businesses. And globally, with most of the big carbon accounting players are part of this alliance now. Collectively, we're only measuring about 100,000. Right? There's a long way to go, and it further emphasizes this is a pie that is more than big enough for all of us, because legislation that's been coming into effect over the recent time and coming into the next 12 months, particularly in the EU Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, that's and then you've got IFRS standards rolling out in 30 jurisdictions at this point. Based on the loose estimation, bare minimum in the next 12 to 18 months that I'm aware of, there will be a legal requirement for up to about 150,000 businesses to have to disclose. And quite a lot of those require them to ask their suppliers for carbon data. So the ripple effect that's coming in the next few years is really substantial. And that means that as a sector, we have to be on the ball. We have to be working together to coordinate and ensure that as we go into exponential scale mode, which is going to happen as an industry, and we start doing hundreds of thousands or millions of carbon footprints every year, the way that that is being done is robust, meaningful, and actually achieving what we need it to achieve, which is meaningful carbon reductions. And that we don't end up in a situation where we have a cowboys and Indians running around, offering a carbon footprint for a $5 and saying that it's robust because I plugged it into this thing and it was easy, it was fine, it worked, and there's no governance, there's no checks. We have to have standards and we have to have a certain amount of robustness as a sector. Otherwise, we will actively undermine the trust and legitimacy of our entire sector, as we've seen the carbon markets do to themselves with the carbon offsetting scandals. Can't have that for carbon accounting. We can't have a situation where if North Star do a measurement and Planet Mark do a measurement of the same company, we come to vastly different conclusions. We are going to break ourselves if that is what's happening. We should not be competing on methodology. We should be competing upon delivery and how great we deliver, but ultimately to the same measurements, the same outcomes. In terms of, it's about how we do it, not what we do.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me to two questions. I'll start with the first one that's more about CAA in general. What are the pillars? What are the things that you folks believe are the things that are deliverables that you mentioned you want to create deliverables? What are the things that CAA wants to found itself on? What are the pillars that you're working on?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's the first thing we started with in January, actually, when we launched it in kind of December. And in January, right, we need to align around a set of objectives. This is, we can do other things. This is going to be the most important things that we do. And we have 3 strategic objectives that were aligned and agreed upon by all members. First is technical alignment. And so that is very much what I said. We cannot be competing on methodology. We should be competing on delivery. And so technical alignment is about making sure that when two carbon accountants measure the same carbon footprint, they come to the same conclusion because they are interpreting the standards in the same way. There will always be gray areas in carbon accounting in the same way that there are gray areas still in financial accounting. 2 different tax lawyers can do very different things to a tax submission, right? There's always going to be a certain amount of gray, but we need to minimize that gray area. And it's making sure that we are consistently interpreting standards in the same ways. And so the way we're thinking about surfacing and kind of delivering that kind of outcome is in facilitating the conversations and discussions that we do within the working groups of different specialist topics and things. But also we want the outcomes from these discussions to feed a Wikipedia style resource, a Wikipedia for carbon accounting, essentially, where it's not there to replace standards. It's built on the standards, but it clarifies how standards can be interpreted. And then we move towards discussing, debating, and agreeing consensus about, okay, the way we think that should have been interpreted in line with best practice would be this. Here's how I measured oat milk. Here is the proxies that I used, the assumptions that I made, and the databases that I referred to. And that means that then if that becomes part of this public kind of knowledge data set, you can come in, you can critique it. And you go, I think you've missed an assumption here. Oh, I don't think you should have used those proxies because actually there was a better database over here that has much more recent figures and data on, the emissions associated with harvesting oats. and we, if it becomes a living and breathing thing, then it will move best practice faster than standards will, because standards are only going to be updated every 5 years, maybe at best. So how can we evolve best practice more quickly and do that by having kind of a living, breathing thing where smaller carbon accountancies can tap into this as a resource, because they don't necessarily have the time and the expertise to go digging for what the best proxies would be, or the best thing there would be. And so we can evolve this kind of shared knowledge source that means that we're all kind of singing from the same hymn sheet. So that's the first one, technical alignment. Second pillar is on professionalization of the sector. And so this is basically recognizing that at the moment, any man, woman, child, or dog can do a carbon footprint, and there is no qualification required.
True.
And you could be doing a carbon footprint, and in some instances, maybe that's appropriate. But if someone's doing the carbon footprint for like Coca-Cola, I kind of want them to have a qualification. Do you know what I mean? I want them to know that they were competent and capable and have the expertise to do that in the appropriate ways. And so we're working with IEMA, the Institute for International Energy Managers Association, I should say, where they work on kind of certifying, accrediting, and having professional registers for a whole array of things. And so what we're trying to do is create a professional register for carbon accounting, which we hope to launch in 2025, that will take people on a journey of qualification on the basis of their experience and their training that they've received. And so it'll go from being an associate to a practitioner to a chartered to a fellow is the idea. That'll be the long-term journey. We're working on associate at the moment. And then there'll be a certain amount of grandparenting where we kind of, jump people straight into certain levels. If they've been, if you've been doing carbon accounting for the last 25 years, you do not want to be called an associate for one day.
Yes.
But, essentially an associate is what you want your junior carbon accountants to know what to do. Like when I recruit someone in, if they have the associate level qualification, I will know that they can do a carbon footprint for a company if I give them a nice, simple, straightforward one. At practitioner, they're going to have a bit more breadth. They're going to understand and be able to make some decisions and interpretations about, some slightly more nuanced things. Maybe they've done not just organizational footprinting, maybe they can do some project-based stuff for events or something like that, or for construction projects or for products as well. Then there'll be the chartered, and that will be one where you are now an expert in carbon accounting for all intents and purposes. You understand the breadth of what it takes, and you will have been performing this. You'll have been in industry for a couple of years. To be chartered, you'll need to have a body of work to prove that you are capable and competent and have delivered real things. And then fellow will be, that's who you turn to when no one else knows what to do, because there's nothing in the standards that tells you what to do about it. And they're the ones who can kind of almost create methodology where methodology doesn't exist. We're a ways off, be able to kind of get a criteria around that. But that's the kind of the ambition and aspiration, as much as anything, to create career paths for carbon accountants where they can demonstrate their credentials. And the beauty of the way that this will work with IEMA is that there will be training and sort of a syllabus that we develop alongside this, but it's trainer agnostic. What that means is if there are those out there with courses that already exist or who want to put courses together to train carbon accountants, they can become accredited as a trainer by IEMA to say, yes, your course covers our syllabus sufficiently, therefore you can now add this badge to your certificates that you give out saying that this is now means that you will be part of the professional register of the Carbon Accounting Alliance and IEMA. Wow. And so we wanted to do that. It was important to us that we weren't trying to create a monopoly kind of thing here where we're going, our way or the highway, you must do it with us. It's not what we're here for. We're here to collaborate and to coordinate. So we wanted to do something that was agnostic, provides a framework and a syllabus that in principle anyone can pick up and then go, right, I'm going to develop a training course. I'm going to get it accredited, which means that it will be recognized as part of this professional pathway. It's in the same way as if you want to become a financial accountant, there's not one trainer who can help you do the chartered financial accounting courses. There's many, right?
And that just speaks to the power of CAA and your folks' ability to work as a group of allies versus, maybe coming at this from a particular organization standpoint where, the incentives are better aligned.
Exactly. We don't want to be territorial. Again, we have to a certain amount, like, yes, you've got 2050 in there, but to a certain extent, we've got 5 years to do something really quite dramatic. If Carbon Accounting Alliance had gone, right, we're going to set up a set of training that everyone in the world must do, it would have taken us maybe 2 years to get to a stage where we would have the whole system set up, all of the training set up, and then we've got to try and persuade everyone in the world to use our training. Like, just it would have taken way too long. So by working with existing platforms like IEMA, who have a global network already, who have global presence already, who have systems, who have tools, who have technologies to do professional registers, it meant that we can launch this and scale this way faster than we could if we tried to do it alone. And so we're always of the mindset, don't reinvent any wheels. If someone's already doing it, help them do it better.
Yeah. I like that.
And spread the word. So a lot of what we use our global gatherings for, which happen on a monthly basis online, is to bring in speakers from, so the one our meeting that we have next week on Tuesday, we have 2 speakers from CDP coming to talk about how they've changed their survey this year, which is a thing of massive relevance to all of us because so many of our clients have to report into CDP. And so us understanding and hearing from the horse's mouth, here's what we've done, here's why we did it, here's what we might be doing next, massively useful. And we can just surface and spread that knowledge out rather than, CDP, Planet Mark going, having a conversation with CDP, learning a bunch of stuff that we then try and use to our competitive advantage. When actually everyone needs to know this stuff. We all need to be understanding what's coming, what's changing, especially in a year where the GHG protocol is being reviewed and updated. The SBTI standard is being reviewed and updated. You've got an ISO net zero standard being developed actively and underway. And so everything that governs measurement, targets, transition plans, and then a potential for a full standard governing all of net zero for organizations emerging in the next 18 months. We've got to share, because otherwise it'll take too long for people to catch up.
Yes.
So that's that one. Then the final one is kind of relevant to that point. Third pillar is to engage with policymakers and standard setters, right? On exactly this sort of thing, where CDP far prefers being able to engage us all as one sector all at once than trying to speak to us one at a time. Same thing is true for the policymakers. Yes. Same thing is true for the standard setters. They want to be able to engage us as a sector to go, what do you think about this? And we can come back with a collective view on that, where we go, there's a mixture of opinion, but overall the majority said that. And so we've already had a number of instances where policymakers and people producing reports have asked us to gauge and gather feedback on particular policy proposals and things, and being able to get that collective view and recommendations back going, we think this, we think that. So the UK government put out things saying, should we align streamline energy and carbon reporting, SECR, which is what mandates disclosure by large organizations in the UK. They have to disclose their carbon footprint and the energy consumption data. Currently, it only mandates Scope 1 and 2 measurement and encourages Scope 3 measurement. It's not aligned to the IFRS standard, the ISSB stuff that has emerged. It's not aligned to that yet. So they put out a consultation end of last year saying, should we align it to IFRS? And what are your views on Scope 3 emissions? Should we make Scope 3 emissions mandatory for large companies to measure? And Carbon Accounting Alliance, you will see the consultation has actually been published. The consultation response has been published on the UK government website. You can go down, you can find Carbon Accounting Alliance is in there as one of the respondents to that consultation. So
that's fantastic.
Being able to do that sort of engagement stuff and bring it together. So technical alignment, professionalization of the sector, and engaging policymakers and standard setters are our 3 kind of North Star things that we're constantly steering ourselves towards to make sure that we are achieving. But there's lots of other things going on within working groups that are setting their own objectives on everything from software interoperability to carbon neutrality and offsetting to regulatory monitoring, forest, land, and agricultural emissions, and so on and so on and so on.
Yeah. And so kind of moving into a little bit more of the conversation around carbon accounting in particular, I'll come at the question from this way. I've worked with a number of organizations, and some of them put their carbon accounting process, I've seen it in a marketing department, I've seen it in a finance department, I've seen it in an operations department, I've seen it people that have zero sustainability backgrounds and they're in charge of leading it because they think it's the right thing to do, and they're like, okay, go for it, you do it. And so there's the, don't let perfect get in the way of progress. Where I feel like there's there's definitely a push and pull between, we want to make these standards robust, we want to make these processes robust, but we also want to make them accessible, because there isn't always organizational buy-in. And, if you can't afford an expensive consultant or to dedicate someone's role specifically to the development of a carbon footprint, you still want those folks that are interested in at least trying to get their foot in the water and to get going. And so how do you view that balance between making it accessible, making it easy to do, but also making it robust and making it impactful?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I would say that there are probably three pieces to the puzzle that I would probably kind of tick off. The first is that we can't lose sight of the goal. Measurement for measurement's sake is pointless. It has to be driving reductions. So we mustn't get hung up on to too much getting the best ever quality data that you could ever believe. And this is so accurate. It's so accurate. But I spent 90% of my time doing this and 10% of my time actually trying to reduce. We can't do that. It's putting the cart before the horse. Like, there's no point in doing it. So we have to always be laser focused on that, and that measurement is a tool to enable an action. And therefore, there are instances, particularly when you look at a small and medium-sized business, where do they need to do a full audited, to reasonable assurance level report on their carbon footprint? Absolutely not. It'd be a waste of time and money. There's no point. So you have to kind of, and that's something I think as a sector we definitely have to grapple with and get to grips with, because of course we want people to do the best they can in all things, but we have to just keep that in mind for ourselves. The second thing is it is incumbent upon us as a sector to make things easier, right? That is our job. That is where our innovation is. And that is where, by the way, our space to compete very much is. If one carbon consultancy and or software provider can come up with ways of automating the gathering of data in a way that is robust and does work and halves the length of the process for the person having to gather that data, they're going to win. They're going to do really well. There is an inherent sense of competitiveness in, I can make delivery easier than you can make delivery, and we can and should compete on that. It's like,
yes,
right? That's our job. That's our job, is to innovate in making it less painful. And then the third piece of the puzzle is around the collaboration to make things easier and more standardized. And so there are good examples of that. Like, yes, you've got the standards that tell us what to do, but actually one example that's happening in the UK, but it's happening in the UK in the same way that the open banking standard began as a UK initiative. And the same team who develops the open banking standard are now doing what is the beginning. They hate it when I say this, but it's the beginnings of an open carbon data standard. They hate using the word standard because they think it doesn't, it's like, but that's what this is starting. But where they're beginning is they always start very small with one use case, one market, one location, one kind of way. And so they're looking at small businesses in the UK that want to unlock green finance by having more accurate and automated measurement of energy consumption.
Wow.
And so what they're doing to achieve that is we're working with smart meter providers to be able to push data directly into a carbon accounting platform, which then pushes outputs directly to the banks, which means that if you've got an SME that wants to access, they want a green loan to help them stick solar panels on their roof or put insulation in, the bank, to call it a green loan and to give a preferential rate, needs assurable data. They need data they can stand by and say, when we gave this loan, it led to energy efficiency. It led to carbon reduction. If they can't say that and they can't prove that, they get in tons of trouble for greenwashing. They can't prove it. They get in tons of trouble, rightly so, right? But how do they prove it if the money they're giving money to an SME who currently finds it really difficult to give credible data? And so what we're doing is the data pulls through automatically. The carbon accountant can look at it, and the data that's pulling through will be half-hour interval data, meaning we can see and linked with what was the carbon intensity of the electricity grid at that moment in time. So we can start seeing, because there are some initiatives that currently carbon accountants are completely missing out on in carbon reduction efforts, because we almost all of us measure, give us your energy consumption data for the month, and I'll get an average of what the grid intensity was for the whole month. And that'll be that.
Or the year.
Or the year, right? And completely neglecting that actually grid intensity is varying throughout the whole day. And if you are a very energy intensive business, if you just change what time of day you do a process, there are less carbon emissions associated with that now. You can't prove that unless you have far more granular data. But gathering far more granular data in any kind of manual way would be an absolute ball ache. It would be awful. And so the opportunity to have this automation, but it's being done as a collaborative industry initiative, which many Carbon Accounting Alliance members are participants of. They have now, I'm pleased to say, Sage, who are one of the Carbon Accounting Alliance members, have been the first pilot. And literally this week, on Tuesday, they did the first successful test of getting this automation of pulling data out of a smart meter into a carbon accounting platform, getting it to the bank, and then the bank being able to use that to provide a loan.
Fantastic. Right? That's exciting.
Really exciting to a small business. So that's been demonstrated. Over the next year, we now want to scale that up. And so we're going to seek to kind of get a scalable solution in place that is slightly less sellotape together with 5 carbon accounting firms, with the intention being that once we prove how this thing works and we have a framework for it, we can then publish that. Everything is being published to do with this. It's going to be open source so that any carbon accountant can pick up that framework and go, right, if I put that API on my platform, I will be able to do that. I will do it in the same way as everyone else is doing it. We do it once well, and then we're able to bring it together in a way that is then replicable and scalable. So it's not one organization has developed an API for one platform and then another one and then another one and another one. No, this is the way it now works. Smart meter data providers, you need to be able to give us your energy data in this format, in this way. Carbon accounting providers, you have to be able to receive it in this way, in this format, and you have to be able to give it to banks in this way, in this format.
Yes. Yeah. And
you do it once, you do it well. And once we establish this, then the aspiration will be to then publish it and do that for energy data, then get other jurisdictions to go, right, US, we want to do it. Right, China, we want to do it. Like get everyone else to adopt the same standard. So then it spreads around the world. And then we're going to start moving into other forms of carbon data that makes sense to go after. There are already projects looking at water consumption. We'll likely look at things like gas and heating. We'll look at probably business travel and or fleet data, where there are obvious ones to go after, where quite often what's happening is all the data already exists. It's just sitting in a different platform.
It's just siloed in its own area.
We need to share.
Let me build off of that in one other area, emission factors.
Yeah.
Obviously DEFRA puts out emission factors. The EPA puts out emission factors. They're very broad ranging, not hyper specific, but are generally accepted as numbers to utilize. And there seems to be a rush right now within let's say this industry to create custom emission factors that are proprietary. And then therefore, then it gives you, instead of ease of use, people are competing with specificity of data. And so thoughts on how emission factors should be shared, how they should be developed, whose responsibility it should be. Obviously, the people that are building these custom emission factors, it just doesn't happen for free. So we do need to be compensated for those efforts. Yeah. So how do we? What are your thoughts on that dynamic in terms of proprietary emission factors versus maybe public open source ones?
In the long run, the best options for the most important things need to be public source. They just always have to be, because again, let's not lose sight of the goal. Right? Let's not lose sight of the goal. If we're keeping really useful things that govern methodology, not quality of delivery, if we're hiding methodology from each other, we are doing ourselves a disservice. It is going to lead to your carbon footprint that you calculate for that company looking massively different to the one that I do. Then they don't trust us. Then they accuse us of making the numbers up. And it undermines the trust and the credibility of our sector. And that is only going to hurt ourselves. So in the long run, I definitely think the more we can go open source on this stuff, the better. One of the things we hope that the Wikipedia kind of solution will do is bring together emissions factors databases that are public source and make them easier to locate and find, and just especially when people are getting into this sector, it is a nightmare finding, especially when you're getting into product footprinting, figuring out exactly what you're going to look at and refer to there. It's a headache. So we want to do what we can to try and make that simpler. That said, I do have a caveat, which is that a lot of the proprietary stuff that's being done is in large part trying to solve for gaps or things that currently aren't easy to measure or are being measured definitively inaccurately. We've got some examples within Planet Mark where we've had situations where our members have rightly complained and gone, particularly when you're looking at scope 3 sort of supply chain emissions, and they're going, your calculation on spend-based footprinting for this, and even for we're not going to get activity-based data out of this supplier because they are a two-person company that is in Switzerland and they work from home. They're not going to give us what we need. But we spend a lot of money on them because they are extremely specialist technical lawyers who advise us. So we spend hundreds of thousands of pounds with them every year, but they're two people sitting in a room in Geneva, right? But because we spend so much money, your office-based calculator assumes that many hours of work are going into this, when actually it's just that they are specialists, so their time is worth a lot more. And so what the hell? This is showing up as a significant, they are not emitting 200 tons. They just aren't.
Yes.
The lawyers sitting in an office in Geneva, they are not emitting 200 tons in a year, right? So, but equally getting data out of them to get an activity-based conversion factor is going to be really hard for us. And so we've been looking at spend-based emissions factors. We've been looking at within our data going, we work with a lot of law firms. Why don't we come up with a better proxy for actually the kind of per hour emissions from a law firm will be lower than in other places. And we can get a really robust thing together that we can put into action to solve this issue that we are seeing. Right? Yeah.
That's
so I think, that's where, for me, that's where these things kind of make sense. And, in the long run, if once we get to a place where we're really, really confident in that approach, I would personally go, we should, say, here's how we're doing it, everyone. Pick it apart, criticize us, help us make this better. But this is our solution to something that was a legitimate issue with a way in which we were trying to do something, right? And that's why we've gone down that path. So I think there is a role for proprietary stuff being developed. I understand why people are doing it. People have data. Data has value. Data has power. But in the long run, I think it will be those who try and kind of hold on to proprietary data sets it will be a losing battle, because they'll find that those who choose to be transparent and choose to share with one another will have an inherent advantage over those who choose to try and, no, I'm just going to do my bit over here and I'm going to look after me, right?
Yep.
And that's one of the things if I could see one thing happen with the Carbon Accounting Alliance, I want to create such a sense of FOMO from not being a part of an open forum where we share and are able, we feel comfortable being very transparent with one another. We feel comfortable admitting when we don't know things, and that we actually, does anyone have any idea? How has anyone approached? And we're seeing that in the platform. People are very candid with each other. I'm going, I actually don't know that.
Yeah, that's nice.
I'm just going to come on this way because I'm really interested to see what other people are thinking about this as well. Because actually, there's a huge amount of grey areas. But it's like, I don't know. I don't know how you're going to do it. So you get to like more recent methodologies like forest, land, and agricultural emissions. We're all learning, and we're all, only usually one step ahead of our clients, which is fine. And so having an environment where we have Chatham House rules in place, where this is a safe space where we shouldn't be like, we may put some rules in place to go, anything that someone shares or asks in this forum, you can share what you learn here. You can't identify who said what, and you can't identify who was part of the conversation, because we need to create a safe space where there's an element of trust built around, I feel happy to be vulnerable about the elements of our methodology that I am not comfortable with, so that we can together advance it. It doesn't work any other way. And so I think I want to create that sense of FOMO, so much so that it becomes a disadvantage to not be part of the collective.
I like that. I think when I speak with a lot of our clients, I definitely say carbon accounting, while it's governed by a protocol and there's some principles and best practices, it's as much art as it is science.
Yeah.
And being able to recognize that, and then with that community of CAA being able to admit to the art that it is, and come to people and say, hey, help me think through this. What's the creative solution to this problem is just so powerful. So again, thank you for creating that community and providing it, and the energy and effort you're putting into it. I want to be respectful of your time. I know we're kind of coming up. So I wanted to see if I could hit you with some quick questions. They're designed to be quick, easy answers. If you don't know, no stress. But are there any newsletters, websites, online resources for professional organizations that you want to recommend for folks to check out? Obviously start with CAAs.
I mean, obviously. So carbonaccountingalliance.com. You can go there. There is, it's currently free to join. Like, we haven't applied any charges to any of this yet. Because we commit to always keeping a open and free component to this. There may be some things that come further down the line where we need people to contribute to a pot to help make them happen. But we commit to, there will always be publicly available stuff. So you can join free. You don't have to be a carbon consultant, like doing stuff for lots of companies necessarily. It is open to corporate professionals working inside companies. It is open to academics, standard setters, researchers. It is open to industry trade bodies who are trying to wrap their head around this. This is a shared space for us to come together and advance the practice of carbon accounting, not necessarily just for those who have software or are consultants or whatever. So go there. There is also a public newsletter that we've just set up the mailing list for. So you can sign up to the newsletter if you don't want to join, but I encourage you to join, because then there's a community platform and tons of other resource base that you get access to that isn't currently public. You have to just join. It's public in that you can join and it doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. What about events? Any events that you like to recommend for folks that are in the industry that they should definitely be checking out, thinking about, maybe considering for next year's travel budget?
Well, so Carbon Accounting Alliance, we have monthly online global gatherings. So you can tune into those from wherever you are in the world. And almost all of it is done online. We have regional branches set up in every part around the globe. And we're starting to see some in-person meetups. We have some in-person meetups in London happen, for example. We have one on Tuesday next week to celebrate the first anniversary. So it'll be a hybrid meeting next week. And there's working groups on lots of different topics to join, which usually happen on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. So there's tons of stuff to get into there. But most excitingly, we are working on a plan to do a carbon accounting conference, which will likely be at least one day to 2 day event in London. October next year probably October, November next year, that we hope to be able to kind of gather carbon accountants for a whole day at least to do some proper, let's get down into the nitty gritty and do some collaborative stuff. Forums, roundtables, workshops, panel discussions, all that good stuff. But we'll have some fun with it. If The Carbon Accounting Alliance, I like to think, could have been started by more boring people. Emilian and I do not like being boring, and so we will find ways to make it as fun and creative and meaningful and impactful as possible.
As a personal testimony to that, I think we were talking about this a little before we started the recorded portion of this conversation. The meetings are fun. There's a lot of laughter. There's a lot of joking going on. There's a lot of diverse opinions that are being shared. So it's certainly not a bore. The meetings are not boring, even though maybe the topics might not be the most exciting for the average lay person. The meetings are definitely, there's good energy in them. So I'll speak to that. If our listeners were to take away one thing from this conversation, what do you think it should be?
If you're in carbon accounting, play nicely with everyone else. Come and play nicely with everyone else. If you're not in carbon accounting, it's an interesting question. If this isn't a relevant sphere for you, I think the climate crisis requires radical collaboration. Carbon accountants have one role to play in this journey, but literally every other profession has its role to play. And so if there isn't an industry forum or a professional forum bringing together people within your area of specialty and expertise, whether that is you are an artist, you are an engineer, you are a logistics company, you are a waste company, you whatever it might be, if you don't have some form of forum bringing you together with your peers to collectively solve the biggest, most challenging problems that you're facing, do it, right? There are going to be some really knotty problems that are going to take massive collaboration to solve. And there are classic examples of that for like things like green steel, whereas like the steel manufacturers, many of them are now getting together. They're pooling resources and money together to invest in trying to evolve technologies because none of them have the budgets to do it independently and come up with some magical solution. So they've come together to try and do stuff. We have to see that in more places and in more sectors and in more industries. And so find your allies. I guess there you go. That's the overall takeaway that is true for everyone. Find your allies, because if you're a carbon accountant, hopefully we can help, signpost a whole bunch of those to you. We've now got over 1,000 people in the alliance. So we've got 570 member organizations, but over 1,000 people. Plenty of allies for you there. If those aren't your allies, find them. Within your business, there will be allies in different professionals, different specialties. One of the first things I encourage people within companies to do is just go and start talking to people, because you will find that there are people who care about this just as much as you do, and you can form a rebel alliance inside your business. But you bring them together, and I've seen so many examples of grassroots activations inside businesses causing quite big companies to have to up their game in sustainability because the staff are demanding it. They're coming and going, we've got a proposal. We want to do this. We want to become a B Corp. We want to measure our carbon footprint. We want to have a net zero target. And if a big enough group of you get together and say that to your board, they're going to struggle to ignore you for very long because they don't want to lose you, right? You have power. And there's power in numbers. There's power in coming together. So, yeah, find your allies.
Find your allies. I love that. That is a great way to say it. Well, Andrew, I want to say, I feel like we could talk about this for another hour. I've got so many other questions that have popped up that I wish I would have had time to chat on. So I'll probably be bothering you for another conversation. Certainly be joining on the monthly calls of CAA and hopefully bringing up some of those conversation topics as well. But I just really want to thank you on behalf of myself and our listeners for sharing your insights, sharing your energy, sharing the resources that you're trying to build to create a network of allies. It's super impactful, it's super powerful, and it's very much needed within our industry. So thank you very much to you and everyone that's working over there at CAA to build this collaboration. It's much appreciated and much needed. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. It's been a pleasure.
This brings us to the end of another lightning episode here at the Carbon Accounting and Management Podcast. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and that you're walking away with new ideas and actionable strategies. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or colleague, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on our latest episode. We also encourage you to join the conversation by rating this episode and sharing your comments and ideas with our community. If you have questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, we encourage you to email us at podcast@northstarcarbon.com. On behalf of myself, your host, Chris Barsman, and the entire North Star Carbon Management team, thank you for investing your time with us today. Until next time.